Anthony Kmasam, Giboyre miyad chamoshim, Rabbi miyad miyad. I'll be a nest, I'll be a bright light, I'll be a miracle, I'll be a miracle of light. I'll be a nest, I'll be a bright light, I'll be a miracle, I'll be a miracle of light. Crushed like an olive, let your oil flow. When there's nothing left, your true colors show. So reach deep down and grab that spark. Ain't you tired of living in the dark? Show me a candle, I show you the light.
Eighth Day, I saw them way back in the day at a Jewish food festival. Cool jam. I don't know if that's a new one. I haven't watched them in a long time. Let me know if you can't hear me. Let's try to get this rolling. Come on. There we go. It's been doing that. Not from the beginning. So we had some questions, but we're going to save those for next time. Hopefully, because the plan was to do this with my Bible study. So if you get questions right, you might win a prize. I'm not sure, I'm going to make you a Hanukkah dish or something fried in oil, or you want me to cover a topic, the winner will get that. So probably exclusively just the guys in my Bible study, because that's the only way I can see it working. But we'll make it work. So we'll save those questions for later from current slide. There we go. That's not the current slide. There we go. Oh, wait. Yeah. Just make sure I look good here. I mean, not me looking good, but making sure that we actually are capturing the screen. All right. Hopefully my face isn't in the way. Don't know why I'm doing this. I don't like my face, but whatever. All right. And let's check the live stream. Hello. Anybody? Come on, peoples. Well, I'm going to get started anyways. And then we'll just cut all this silliness out. Streamline it. How do I get full screen here? I would like it to be full screen. Can we do that? Let me just reset here for a second. Because I would like that to be full screen. Not like anyone's here anyways. Take my time. Drink my beverage. I need to make this all in a separate PowerPoints. Slideshow. Current slide. There we go. All right, we'll just not exit the full screen this time. So we're going to go beyond this. Not today. We definitely won't go beyond this time range today, but in part 2, there'll be a second Maccabean Revolt. Part 2, because Seleucid Empire just ain't going away, right? Just in case Antiochus is going away doesn't mean they're going away. So we got the hammer here. That's what Maccabee means, or Macabre. Macabre, I think, is to hammer. So they're given that name because of what they do. And we'll get to them in a second. So most of this is coming from Josephus and 1st and 2nd Maccabees. And just a reminder that it's just not a jaunt through history. We're trying to look at the priesthood. We're trying to look at where the Pharisees, where the Sadducees came from, what they believe, and how that led into rabbinical Judaism, and who are the Sadducees today? Who are the Essenes? Who are the Zadokites? So you might notice that I focus more on the priesthood and stuff and less about Judah running around and killing people. Just to hit part 2 again, we look down on the Ptolemies, and there's some funny questions there that we'll cover next week. But they did give us the Septuagint. Now, this is credited with a star here, Ptolemy II, Philadelphus, but Philopator was the 4th. Is a story of Maccabees the 3rd. I think it would make sense if it was the 4th. Just like he saw these angels, and he's like, all right, I want to know more about your God, right? He's clearly real. So maybe that's what caused it. It would fit this time reign, very end of it, right? It was around 205 BC, that Battle of Raphia. But anyways, I asked my Orthodox patient about this, and he knew right away. It's like, yep, 72 elders, put them in different chambers, and they all wrote their own version, and it was all perfect. And it's like, it's a God thing, it's a miracle. So that was just the Torah. So just the first 5 books. But still, thank you, Library of Alexandria and the Ptolemies. You did give us something. So I'll be remiss if we did not mention such things. Okay, moving on. So now the Ptolemies are getting it handed to them by the Seleucids. The tables have turned. So in 170 BC, Antiochus, this will be the fourth, he conquers all but Alexandria. He's just a busy boy. He has to go back up north, fight the Parthians and whoever else is up there. Lots of people to battle. All right, this is the Fertile Crescent. It's just a constant struggle. It's our giant kingdom to hold. So he has to return. And Rome is thinking at this point, like, all right, I like these two guys fighting each other, but at the same time, if one king conquers all of it, then he's king of everything. And then, like we mentioned in part 2, if the Greek states united, then it'd be trouble for Rome. It'd be a lot. They're dealing with not just the Greeks, Thrace and Greece, but Carthage doesn't like them, and Hannibal and all that fun stuff. So at first, Judea welcomed, and this was a surprise to me, welcomed the change, because the House of Ptolemy were not as tolerant as the Seleucids were, which is surprising if you've read Maccabees before. So then in 168 BC, Antiochus, he's ready again for round 2 with the Ptolemies. He comes back down, and this time to finish the job. And this is where Rome is getting scared. There's Alexandria. So it's a cool story that, Antiochus and his army are somewhere around the Sinai Peninsula, I believe, and close to the coast. So this guy meets him on the beach to draw a line in the sand. Circle in the sand, really. Circles him and says, if you leave this circle, before you leave this circle, give me an answer. Tell me, are you going to attack the Ptolemies? Because if you do, Rome will be against you. Or you can turn around and Rome will do nothing. So he wasn't able to talk with his advisors. He had to make a decision right there. He decided he didn't really want to deal with Rome. He had enough to deal with. But the big problem is there. He's now unable to pay his soldiers with the promised loot from Egypt. So Antiochus needed a new target to unleash his army on. And he knew the Judeans were running a surplus at the temple in Jerusalem to prepare for the Shemitah year. So that's the 7th year. So they kind of smartly store up for the 7th year where they're going to let the land rest. They're not going to sow any crops. That means they're going to miss out on that harvest. So they prepare. Go home or fight Rome. So we're going to backtrack a little bit. Look at the triple change up here in the priesthood. So we got the good priest, which is Onias III. We got the bad guy, is Jason. He's bad. He changed his name to a Greek name. His name would have been Joshua or Yeshua. And the ugly is Menelaus. Right? So let's talk about them quick. So Jason was the brother of Onias III. And we think of Onias III, he's like the last Sadducite priest. He's the last priest, we could say ever, high priest ever, right? That's crazy to think about. Because everyone that follows him, there's good people and there's good intentioned, but they were not of the line of Zadok. And the people argue that. But he was of the Oniads, Simon II. He was high priest. He's a righteous man. Jason, not so much. He's already Greek-minded, and he wants the high priest, so he decides to buy it. So Hellenization began under Jason, who just paid off Antiochus for the position of high priest. And he instituted the Greek Games, and he built a training facility, an arena, all that stuff, sending the Jews out to go compete. Many Jews, stopped circumcising their sons so they could compete in these games because, they would wrestle nude and stuff like that, perform nude, and they would do the discus game, which I have no idea what that is. I like ultimate frisbee myself, but I'm feeling it's different. Some went even further to surgically attach pigskin to create a foreskin. So, when Paul's talking about, don't try to hide the marks of your circumcision, I think it's in 1 Corinthians 7 or something like that. And there's other references to that. I mean, this might have been an actual thing. It might have been referencing an actual thing because this one had been going on. Just, even though the Greeks and ultimately lose to Rome, they win because Greek culture, Hellenization, continues. In Judea right now, everybody speaks Greek, right? It's the common language. So the ugly Menelaus, he was actually sent by Jason to go talk to Antiochus. I forget the reason, but Antiochus is on his way down, bringing us back to our timeline. He's on his way to attack the Ptolemies again in 168. And Menelaus is like, I'm just going to buy the priesthood myself, buy the high priest position myself. So he just gives more money because Jason had sent him with money, I believe, and he's just like, I'm just going to add some more money on top of that. And he's like, well, and he just liked Menelaus because he's even more Greek. But at this point, Antiochus is busy. He's thinking about taking the Ptolemies down, right? Until he got rejected by that line in the sand. So he's got to figure out how to pay his soldiers. And he's just angry altogether. So a rumor of Antiochus' death, after Menelaus took over, Jason was, had to flee. So Jason comes back to retake Jerusalem. So he's fighting his own men. There's no Seleucid garrison at this point. He's killing Jews. He fails to kill Menelaus or secure the government. And when Antiochus is coming back, he's just forced to flee to the wilderness. And eventually he dies in Egypt. So this revolt, this caused the king to think Judea was in revolt. Well, it wasn't. It was just one guy and just 1,000 soldiers. So Antiochus was furious. His high priest had been replaced. So he plundered the treasury. Probably just used it as an excuse. Probably knew it was up. Just threw it out of proportion because he knew he had it. But he really goes overboard. He defiles the temple with sacrificing a pig. This is considered the abomination of desolation on the altar. Placing idols, Greek gods there. He issued an edict that forbid Torah observance such as circumcision, and many priests were forced to eat pork, and many just spit it out and just were tortured and killed in terrible, terrible ways. So go read about that in the Maccabees and Josephus. Second Maccabees is a story of it's terrible. I don't know why. I was caught in the car. I was listening to the audio. I'm like, no, stop. It's just so bad. Seven brothers and their mother just one by one tortured and killed, trying to get them to just, go against Yahweh, just to break his covenant. Simple things like eating a piece of bacon. So stuff your standard Christian today would be like, all right, that's no problem. I'll take the bacon over having my limbs chopped off and being fried in oil. Definitely, that sounds okay. And they were rewarded. Those who did that and became Hellenized were rewarded by Antiochus and his officials. Yes, this is a picture of 70 AD under Rome, so this is a lot of Herodian structure here. I wouldn't have looked at this grand, but this does give us a picture of the Acra, kind of off to the right here, which would be similar to what the Greeks are going to build here in a second. And just to backtrack a little bit, doing a lot of that back and forth today. So back when Onias III, so the question is, with this abomination of desolation, it was like, where is God? Why isn't he defending his people? Why is he defending the temple? We just go back a little bit. And this is a picture. These three characters here, the guy on a horse, are all depicted in Maccabees. They're beating down this Heliodorus. I think this is around 170. He goes into the temple and he goes to pillage it. And the other priest's like, don't do that. And Onias III is like, don't do that. And like these angelic figures come out and they beat him pretty much to death. And Onias III, prays over him and he does a sacrifice. And Heliodorus recovers and he's so thankful. And he goes back to Antiochus and tells him what happened. So the question is, Antiochus did the same thing. He plundered the temple, went in there, desecrated, far worse than Heliodorus did. Where was the response? And I would say it's just a picture of righteousness versus sin. There was a high priest and there was people, living righteously, and that allows God to be there in his presence. But he punishes believers because he loves us and he wants, so because they were living in sin, because they were turning back on his Torah, this is why Antiochus was brought in. This all played out for a reason. So that's the contrast between those two. That's what I would put forward there. Again, here's our picture of the Acra. This would be a more Herodian square block style. But we can see the Acra there, would be close to the Temple Mount. So this happens over and over again in the story. The Jerusalem walls are dismantled. So there's just this little fortress here that comes into play later. That's why we mentioned it. The Acra. It's a cool name. So after Antiochus IV goes and, deals fighting the Parthians again for the third time. And we'll get that again later when we talk about John Hyrcanus. We send this Apollonius guy down. And, he pretends to be nice for a little bit. And then on the seventh day, on the Sabbath, he gets his soldiers out, full armor, and pretends like he's doing a parade with banners and everything. And people come out, curious, and just start slaughtering them. And this is when people just flee Jerusalem altogether, and the Maccabees flee. Jerusalem's just essentially abandoned except for the Greeks. And he kind of used the Sabbath day because he flushed out anyone who was observing that. The Greeks wouldn't have bothered the Hellenized Jews, which, it's really an oxymoron to be an Hellenized Jew. If you're Jewish, you embrace Judaism or being a Hebrew, just like a Christian. If I say I'm a Christian, I believe in God. It's not just because my parents are Christian. So we use that term just so you know that they were once of the Jewish faith. And Samaria, you think about Antiochus IV, he's going up from Jerusalem, he's going back north, he's going to go through Samaria, so he's going to, what about the lost 10 tribes? A lot of them returned. What's happening in there? It's something that we see in Jesus' day. In Mount Gerizim, that temple is mentioned as well, and he's talking to them at the well. They just were like, we're Arabs, we're Nabateans. Don't hurt us. So then they just renamed their temple right there. It's like, it's this temple? The temple of Jupiter Hellenus. Yeah. No, it's not a temple to Yahweh. And then it always was. It's like, were they misguided? Yes, but they always had like Hebraic roots at least, and the understanding of Abraham and maybe the book of Genesis. And the Samaritan faith still exists today. Trying to drive through this as fast as we can. So Mattathias, the Hasmonean descendant, supposedly, of Phinehas. So our buddy Phinehas, you can remember, was the Levite who killed I believe it was of the tribe of Judah, who, they're taking pagan wives, doing what they shouldn't, and he, takes that spear and drives it right through them. So this is a contrast to what Mattathias does. There's this official that tells Mattathias to offer sacrifice this pig on this altar outside of Jerusalem. And it probably wasn't even an altar. It's just, they set up an altar and be like, here, sacrifice a pig. And, he was a Levite. He said, no, I'm not going to do it. So this other Jew says he's going to step up and do it. And Mattathias kills him. And then Mattathias' sons, Judah Maccabee included, kill that small force of Greeks and go into the wilderness and start, essentially doing, Braveheart, William Wallace style, guerrilla warfare, slowly building forces. So Mattathias quickly dies off. We don't tell how he dies, but slowly the 5 brothers. We got John, we got Simon, we got Judas, we got Eleazar, and we got Jonathan. So these 5 guys are all captains. And they build a force of good 6,000 soldiers, doing guerrilla style warfare, taking down small forts and towns, freeing slaves. A lot of Jews were set into slavery when Antiochus came into Jerusalem, just to pay off his troops. Lots of Jews were killed, and lots of Jews were sent into slavery, and then many were tortured and murdered. It was a terrible, terrible time, rough time. But if you want to read all about that, there you go. Maccabees and Josephus will give you all the works of Judah. Cool stuff, a lot of stuff on YouTube too. You can watch little battles that took place. People really break it down. I'm just trying to give you this perspective here on the Pharisees and the Sadducees and where they came from. So we're going to skip a lot of that. So they retake Jerusalem in 167, which was probably not that hard since it didn't have any walls, remember, but there is the Acra, which is filled with Greeks and these Hellenized Jews. So they go and they rebuild the walls, Judah does, and they rededicate the temple, and that brings us to our story of Hanukkah, which we will get to next week. So there's Mr. Judah Maccabee, the hammer, who sadly probably didn't use a hammer, but that's how I always picture him, like a giant hammer. And so yeah, we'll talk about, is there really a miracle, the oil, and what, there's 2 big miracles that happen. So we'll look at those next week. So we'll get out of here, back out. I'll see if anyone has said hello to me. Yo, we got Josh saying hello. Yeah, if anyone's there, if you have any questions at this point, go ahead and let me know. We'll just hit that song a little bit more.
Show me a candlelight, show you that light. Blow smoke in the face of darkness. Set fires to burn up the night. Tell every tale all your stories, be a miracle of light. Blow smoke in the face of darkness, set fires to burn up the night. Tell her and tell all your stories, be a miracle of light. Tanto estidom, לקמת נקבע סום, גיבורי ביד חלושים, רבי ביד ביד. I'll be a nest, nest, I'll be a bright light, I'll be a miracle, I'll be a miracle of light. I'll be a nest, nest, I'll be a bright light, I'll be a miracle, I'll be a miracle of light. I'll be a nest, 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 nest, I'll be a bright light, I'll be a miracle, I'll be a miracle of light. I'll be a nest, nest, I'll be a bright light, I'll be a miracle, I'll be a miracle of light. I'll be a nest, 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 nest, I'll be a bright light, I'll be a miracle, I'll be a miracle of light. I'll be a nest, nest, I'll be a bright light, I'll be a miracle, I'll be a miracle of light. I'll be a nest, I'll be a miracle, miracle of light. I'll be a nest.
Try to get a buddy to call in here. I don't know how to take you via the internet, but if you want to call on the phone, we can chat if you want to. Up to you. I don't know how delayed this is or where you're at. Nest. I'm not sure what nest means. I think it's like probably means miracle or something. To Google that one. Nest. Let's do it on my phone here because my mic is blocking my keyboard. Josh probably was going to ask me about the Hazadeans, and I don't know if I have a good answer for him. I do believe they are mentioned in the Maccabees. The Hazadeans joined with the Maccabees. They are separate. And not too many spoilers, but the Hazadeans, or the Maccabees, essentially become the Sadducees. And it's like saying Republican and Democrat. There's people that are very far left and people that are very far right. And it's the same with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So very far right, we'll say, is Pharisee. And that would be kind of like the Hazadeans, known as the pious ones. So they're very strict, Torah observant. These would be the guys that everything went off the rails after Onias III for sure. Probably he would have fit more into the Hazadean idea, definitely more Pharisaical. The high priests, pretty much every high priest after, is Sadducean, or at least Sadducean at some point. Like I know John Hyrcanus is Pharisee at one point, and then switches to Sadducee, which was sad to see. I'm hilarious. That was on the spot. But we'll get to him. He'll probably be not next week, but soon. Very fun. Like, forget Game of Thrones. John Hyrcanus is cooler. He's the man. But we all make mistakes, right? So yeah, I do think the Hazadeans, and I think a lot of people do, have the idea that they become the Essenes. But it's hard to say, like going back to this point. Okay, there's no Essenes, there's no Pharisees. They're still creating these divisions at this point. Just because they're mentioned in Maccabees doesn't mean that they're going to change. And even rabbinical Judaism kind of points to being kind of Hasidian, kind of Pharisee, but it's like, well, what does that really mean? Some Orthodox I talked to today, it's like, where are you getting this crazy? This just sounds like Eastern mysticism to me. Like, I don't remember that in the Torah. And they just claim, well, the oral that's been handed down is far more. He's like, things have been hidden on purpose from the written. So I'm like, oh, you can just make it whatever you want then if it's oral Torah. And it's like, and the Pharisees did do a lot of making things up. Would that only be composed of food? Yeah, the Hasidians are definitely pro-priesthood. It's just they lost the priesthood. Like Onias III would be the last one. Everyone after that, like Judah Maccabee, and I understand what Judah Maccabee does. He takes up high priest, but he would be considered prince or king as well. And then same with all his brothers. Not to spoil, but Simon was prince and high priest. And Simon's son is John Hyrcanus. John Hyrcanus becomes high priest, last of the Maccabees, and king. And they just, first, you're not supposed to be king and high priest. That's bad. And there's debate on whether they're of the line of Zadok. Some people say they are. But just, they become more loosey-goosey with the laws, where the Pharisees and the Hasidians were more strict. And I think the Hasidians eventually just separated. They realized the priesthood is so corrupt, the temple is so corrupt, especially when the Herods rolled in, so corrupt after the Hasmonean dynasty ends, that it makes sense that they would be the Essenes that would break off. Like John the Baptist in the wilderness, why is he there? Just fulfilling his priesthood just away from Jerusalem because it becomes so corrupt. So yeah, maybe it was a mishmash of different faithful groups. Makes sense. But they definitely fought on the side of the Maccabees. They're friends right now, so it's common enemy. But I kind of like, there's stories of, and early on, that Hebrews, when you fight back on the Sabbath day, we kind of mentioned Apollonius, attacking on the Sabbath day. Like, they wouldn't even defend themselves because they thought it was breaking Torah. But righteousness is, sacrificing yourself for others. So the more loving thing to do is to fight to defend your family. That's the most loving thing to do. And that's what Jesus would show. He would show that, he was doing priestly works on the Sabbath, healing people. That's greater love than, sitting laying around on a couch doing nothing, which is, you got to observe the letter of the law. And so they would even just the Greeks would just wait for the Sabbath. Like, all right, they're not going to fight back. We'll just wait for the Sabbath and we'll just slaughter them all. That's probably how Mattathias died. And probably I can see a lot of the Hasidians just doing that at first. But Judah and his brothers decided, okay, we can't really do that. If we're going to win this war, because they're just going to keep attacking us on the Sabbath and slaughtering us all. Again, my research is incomplete on the Hasidians, so don't take anything. But they're just starting to appear in the story. So give me a break. Yeah, next week we'll spend a lot of time looking more at the temple and Judah becoming high priest and how that looks and where he starts messing up. Because at this point he's like, yeah, he's the man. Hanukkah, Judah Maccabee. But he's just human and he messes up. And people point to him praying to Onias. Onias III is the guy he prays to him, which kind of makes sense because Onias III is killed, I believe, by somebody. Menelaus sends a guy to just murder him straight up. So he's dead at the time that Judah Maccabee recovers the temple. So Onias is dead. So who do you pray to? You would normally use an emissary to communicate with God. in the Jewish mindset. So it's not like he's praying to someone who is dead, like Catholics do. He just, and just because he does something doesn't make it right. So it doesn't make, the Catholics defend the Book of Maccabees. I'm not going to sit here and defend the Book of Maccabees as scripture. I'm just playing devil's advocate there. Yeah. I wouldn't say all Maccabees were Sadducees. I just, anyone who took part in that revolt would be considered a Maccabee, but the Maccabee family of the 5 become, the Sadducees. I would say Onias III was a Zadokite. And they just never get back the high priesthood. They're still there. They don't go away. There you'll see there's lots of massive battles. You think the Pharisees and Sadducees are getting along like they do in the Gospels? No. There are massive wars between them. There's a story, and we'll get to, of 800 Pharisees after a long war with Alexander Yanai. He crucifies 800 Pharisees. He murders their family in front of them while they're hanging off the cross. They had big trouble between them. It's not like we see in the Gospels, but we need to understand that in a good 100 years before, they were just killing each other. That's how important this whole priesthood thing was to them. So they were at odds. So don't say the Pharisees just rolled over and took this. They fought for it. The Zadokites fought for it. They knew it was wrong. Most of them did. Pharisees get a bad rap, but they tried. They definitely tried. Most of the Pharisees, Galilee, once it was the Hasmoneans, like you saw the pictures, tiny Judea. Right? They reclaim a lot of land. So there's Jews still living. There are already a lot of Jews living in the Galilee. But most of the, where Jesus was born, he would have been around a ton of Pharisees. That's why he probably was very familiar with their beliefs. Probably even grew up anyone saw him next to another guy, like, oh, that guy's a Pharisee. So lots of Pharisees in the Galilee. It'd be in the big cities, right? Kind of like Republicans, right? They're out there in the woods, in the sticks, and most of the Democrats are living in the big cities. So very similar. And their Senate, the Sanhedrin, is very, our Senate is very modeled after the Sanhedrin. They would have Pharisees and Sadducees, somewhat equal, sometimes not equal. Sometimes there'd be a majority either way. But most of the Pharisees were your worker class, but kind of not super rich, but more your artisans and small business owners would be Pharisees. Where you're really super, super rich would be Sadducees, because it would just profit them to be a little more loosey-goosey with their faith and their Torah observance. John the Baptist probably started out Pharisee. We know he was of a priestly line, maybe of the Zadokites, and probably in line for, at very least, a high priestly position, if not high priest. Not going to get it, because up to that point, you saw what happened with Jason and Menelaus. They're just buying. That doesn't change. Same with the Herods. They're just buying. Whoever wants high priest, it's for sale. It becomes, just appointed. They're just appointed by whoever's king, whoever's prince, or even, as we'll see, the Seleucids will appoint, or the Romans will appoint. Romans, for the most part, just stayed out of it, but all the other Antiochus, not so much. Demetrius, not so much. So maybe something else? Essene? Zadokite? I'm just saying Pharisees and Zadokites looked very, very similar. Like it's Republican and there's far right. Essene would have been far right. This is fun. I like this conversation. But you let me know if you've had enough. of my circle answers. This is good though. This gives me ideas of things to explore. It keeps me on track because even when I'm deleting slides as I'm going, because I'm like, we don't need to talk about what John did in this battle. Everything. Go read that. That's not what I'm trying to do. I am trying to build where these sects came from. They just didn't appear out of thin air. You read the Old Testament and they're going into exile because they aren't keeping the Torah. And then all of a sudden you have these Pharisees who are like super legalistic, making fences around the Torah. Like that doesn't just happen, okay? You don't go from one extreme to the other, like, going into exile because of disobedience to being like super legalistic that you're missing the letter of the law. Right? So something big happened, and this is one of those big things, and we'll show you some more of the big things that happened that created this mindset, created these people that Jesus is interacting with during the gospel. I see what you mean. Baptist. Yes. Yeah. Right. Broad term, right? I mean, what I think Hasidians, they're not even sure. It might mean pious ones, or Pharisees means set apart ones, or Sadducees means sons or descendants of Zadok, which is really on the nose because they weren't. Because they were just like, oh, we are the sons of Zadok. This is, we belong here in this high priesthood position that we took by force, and we'll kill you if you question us. Yeah, there's something wrong with that. That's why the Torah says that there's only going to be one high priest, right? That's king. His name's Jesus. It's the Messiah. That's another thing that's really interesting is you don't really see king priests at all. Like David put on a linen ephod like once or twice, but a king taking on priestly role, that was just for the Melchizedek, the second Adam. And that's why I think this is really interesting. And I think there's a few I think Sadducees are a lot like amillennialists. They thought they were ushering in the kingdom, and I think at least one of them thought for sure he was the Messiah. Yeah, he was the king priest that the Old Testament prophesied. And he was living out prophesying. He was ushering in the kingdom of God. Big spoiler alerts. I'm going to edit that one out. I don't want you to know where I'm going. In my drinking, it's non-alcoholic, dark and gordy, athletic, 70 calories. It's a nice little kettlebell workout. Working on a Hanukkah workout. It's going to be carry your kettlebell, flee from Jerusalem. So you got your small child you're carrying, you're running, do a little 200-meter run, and then you're going to hammer the Greeks. So I got some wall balls. I can do some slams, or I'm going to maybe get a sledgehammer because I got a big tire, so we can do the Judah Maccabee, hammer the tire, do 20 of those. And then there's going to be rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, which is either going to be like a wall ball, like squat, wall ball, or just, squat thruster with a kettlebell. I'll rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and then rededicate the temple. Will be, I think, like a single leg RDL or like a B stance RDL with a row. So you're in that bowed position when you're in the temple, in reverence. And we'll talk about that rededication next week and the 8 days. Do you think the miracle of the oil was real, or was that made up? How's my mic, by the way? I'm half trying to be quiet because my child's upstairs sleeping. And I kind of forget that I'm not in a small apartment anymore and I'm in a house where I can just be a little louder. I'm a mumbler anyways, but I'm trying to eat the mic. No sense about said. Leave the world of the prophet. Kind of what I just said. They thought they were ushering in the kingdom. which is like kind of like an amillennialist idea. Like the kingdom is now. Like there's no resurrection. I am the Messiah, right? They thought this is it. This is what's been foretold. This is the kingdom of God. We're establishing it right now. We're building it, and we can attain eternal life. And I think that's where a lot of like talking to this Orthodox patient today, they just think they can attain eternal life, and through all this mysticism that gets somehow built in to Judaism. I think a lot of it started here. Just crazy. I'm going to explore that more, but that's my short answer. No resurrection because they're getting that eternal life. Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. I don't know. What happened to the dead? I think there's a bit of a reincarnation idea built into their belief system. And you'll get some of that with super Orthodox Jews, that that you're just your ancestors essentially. So you are just reincarnated instead of resurrection. Would be just an off the wall guess. And there are only a few verses that talk about resurrection of the dead in general. So it might be just some of them thought you're dead. And this guy the other day was just talking about time travel. Just like, you can go to your higher mind, and you can take your mind and your spirit and your nefesh and put it in someone else's body in the future and in the past. I'm like, this is just, where do you get this? And they just keep going back to that. Oh, it's the oral Torah. Right, yeah. I think a lot of it came out of Babylon, Syria, Persia. They came out of there with some crazy stuff. Yeah, Judaism today would say they're more Pharisaical, but you see a lot of, I think there's Jews that are level that are probably more Pharisee, but there's a lot that are just straight up Sadducee. Getting a lot of that, and you can't just make fun of the Jews. It's happening in the church. A lot of mysticism in the church. Yeah, Zoroastrianism, I believe, was the main religion of Persia. Which kind of was like just a mixture of everything. It's like, your God is God, but that God's also God, and that God's God, and that tree over there is God. That signpost is God. I believe Freddie Mercury was a Zoroastrian, I claim to be. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. But I think about the Seleucids there. They're pretty much modern. They're, well, not modern. No, Persia. At the time, the same land. They controlled the same land. We just think like with the Ptolemies, there's just a few Greeks. Still, all the Egyptians that have been living there. It's just the Greeks are in power. Same people, same belief systems would have carried on. Merging, Hellenized. I think the Sadducees, allowed to be mixed. So they knew they would get less pushback from the Greeks if they just went with the flow. And even a lot of the documentaries I watched in preparation for this, like at the end, because you could tell they're just kind of atheists. They're like, well, the Jews, it was brave what they did, but maybe they should just go along. develop with the Greeks, and maybe less people would have had to die. Like, really? That's what your conclusion is? It's what made me angry enough to do this series. It's like, how can you talk about these people being so brave and dying, facing all this torture? Be like, well, they could have just avoided it. Come on, eat the ham sandwich. Just circumcise your child later. All right. Let's end it there. If you have any questions, got 2 seconds. Get to work on part 4. Christmas is so close. Hanukkah next week. You know, it's crazy, like that story of the 7 sons. It's sad, but it's also, yeah, it's very encouraging how they stand up. Even the little one, I forget how old he is, like, what, 10 or something, just telling the king off, like, yeah, do what you will. It's like, what are you waiting for? And just like what the mother says to him. It's like, There's another cool mother. John Hyrcanus' mother. Similar. You know, what she says is really cool. They don't make mothers like that anymore. All right, thanks for the questions, the feedback, back and forth. Hope you guys like this. Really long, almost an hour. So yeah, I'll try to edit this down. Just so we get like a small little part 3. Take care, guys. Shabbat shalom. And